Hi there YouTube, Michael Gallagher here, the Media Preacher, back with another video. If you like the videos, I always say it, or I try and say it at the start of the videos, please like them, please subscribe them, please share them, please help me to get them out there so I can share some of these views with as many people as possible, because it's great to be part of a community, which is basically what we are here at the VC. And I've noticed that, watching a lot of people's videos over the last few months, a lot of people have been talking about Paul McCartney. A living legend, member of the Beatles, somebody who is really untouchable in the music business in terms of the length of the career, the quality of the career, the achievements during the career. Nobody really comes close to Paul McCartney. Because he was a Beatle, number one, because he outlived John and George, who would have been real contenders probably for the same sort of crown, the same sort of title, but also because he's still relevant in 2018. And I think it's fair to say that he is still relevant in 2018, whether people are being introduced, newer people are being introduced to his music from the 60s, from the 70s, 80s, 90s, from the 2000s. There's something there for everybody, and his career is so rich. And part of the reason that he can still sell these huge stadium type gigs is because throughout the decades he has essentially amassed an army of fans, right from the original fans, the original generation, my parents' generation, who have then passed the music down to my generation, and now my generation having children and passing the music down to them. I mean, his music will live on a long time after he's gone, in the same way that John's music still lives on, and in the same way that George's music still lives on. But perhaps unlike George and John, because he's getting older, one of the recent conversations about Paul McCartney on the VC has been about the quality of his voice. And there have been certain criticisms about the quality of McCartney's voice, perhaps him not having as good a voice as he used to have. And I think it's fair to say that his voice has definitely changed, and it's definitely sounding more weathered and aged at this point. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I actually think it's probably quite a good thing, because you don't want to have a replica of the same song time after time after time again. You want the artist to record the song as it was originally envisaged. So perhaps take one of the Beatles songs like Blackbird from the White Album, and you hear a youthful McCartney. Now when you go to see McCartney in concert, he will often play Blackbird, but the song sounds so much more aged. It sounds so much, it has more depth. It gives the song more feeling, because the song, of course, is a civil rights song, and being sung from the perspective of somebody who has lived a great life and a long life, it has a slightly different inflection from the youthful vibrance that the recordings, say, on the White Album has. And so when you revisit the song with newer recordings, I think it actually becomes an even deeper song with even more meaning. I mean, part of the reason that McCartney's voice perhaps is sounding slightly more aged at this point is because of his continual touring. He just seems to not stop. The man is a machine. He didn't tour that much in the 70s or the 80s. I think he started touring really at the end of the 80s, didn't he? With Flowers in the Dirt, but didn't tour a massive amount in the 70s. I know there was the tour with Wings, the big tour, Wings Over America, but it wasn't continual touring like this has been. I mean, I'm sure since about the early 2000s, the early noughties, McCartney has pretty much been continually on tour. And I've been lucky enough to see him, I think, 3 times now. Early 2000s, about 2010, and then about 2 years ago I saw him. And I've seen him at Hyde Park, the O2, and also in Birmingham at to the NEC, which was they were all absolutely fantastic gigs. I mean, he is truly a genius. And when you go and see him in concert, you realise that this is someone who is extremely important in music. But that continual touring, I think, has put a bit of a strain on his voice. So his voice perhaps isn't as weathered as some of us would think, because now we've got access to YouTube. Almost everybody at a concert's taking some memory of the concert home with them by recording it on their phone. Then lots of people then upload those clips to YouTube. So it's very hard for him to hide the fact that his voice perhaps isn't quite as strong. But for instance, I was watching clips from the secret gig at the Liverpool pub from a few days ago, and McCartney's had a bit of a break, and to my ear his voice sounded much stronger at that gig than it has done in some of the recent concert footage that I've seen. And perhaps that's just down to the fact that he is getting older. He is human after all. You know, it's part of life. Aging is part of life, and he can't physically keep up with the kind of rigorous demands that touring is putting on his voice. But as I say, I thought his voice sounded really, really good in that Liverpool gig. And, you know, maybe there's an argument for, you know, a man who is in his 70s, well into his 70s, to perhaps just slow down a bit, not do so many gigs. He's not doing it for money. He's not. I don't think he's even doing it for ego. He doesn't need to do. He's got absolutely nothing to prove. I think he's doing it because he wants to be able to do it while he can, so the fans can see him, and as many fans as possible can go and see a living legend in concert. And you know, a lot of people on the VC will have seen Paul McCartney in concert over the years, probably on numerous occasions, and you know what I'm talking about. But anybody that hasn't been to see him, I would say go and see him. Don't wait, because you know he won't be with us forever. So make sure that you see him in concert if you can. I mean, part of the thing about McCartney is I didn't realise how relevant he is in 2018, because I sort of was of the opinion for many years that anything post sort of Flowers in the Dirt was fairly average Paul McCartney fare. I took the view that the songs were not very exciting, that he wasn't writing in the same way that he had been. And clearly there are some real bumps in McCartney's journey, but he's released so much material that is perhaps inevitable. What I didn't realise is the quality of some of the work he's produced for us over the last few years. And I think I realised that there was a wealth of McCartney post Flowers in the Dirt material that I simply hadn't mined. About a year ago, when I bought the Pure McCartney set on CD from HMV. This is a greatest hits set. Most of you will recognise it, and a lot of you will already have it. But I was of the view that really his work past Flowers in the Dirt had not been particularly strong. And so I bought this set. Don't normally buy greatest hit sets at all, but I bought this set because I really like the packaging of it. And when I looked at the track list, there were lots of tracks here that I didn't have on CD because I had lots of gaps in my McCartney education. So I bought the CD thinking, well, it's a good retrospective of his career. But there were certain songs in here that I was really, really drawn to that I didn't realise I would love as much as I do. Hope for the Future being one of them, and particularly a song called Jenny Wren, which I thought was amazing. Listen to it. Look, God, this sounds great. It's recorded brilliantly well. It's brilliantly performed. It's a brilliantly written McCartney tune. It's very melodic. And I did a bit of research into Jenny Wren because I thought, I don't know the album that this is from. Thinking it was perhaps an 80s track or even a late 70s track. And I was surprised to find out that it was on an album that was released in the 2000s called Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. And so I had to go immediately and explore that album. And on exploring that album, I realised just how good some of the newer McCartney work is. And his voice is different on some of these songs. It's not as youthful as it was, but it's absolutely age appropriate to the songs that he's writing. And some of the songs that he's written, Jenny Wren being one of my absolute favourites, and possibly in some of my favourite McCartney songs of all time, really show that somebody with an older voice, given the right material, can showcase their voice amazingly well. And McCartney is a great example of this. This is a great set, by the way. Anybody who is not into McCartney or doesn't know much about McCartney, if there are even many of those people on the planet, should pick up this album. If you've got gaps in your McCartney education, do what I did, pick up this album. It's well worth the punt. But anyway, so I get Chaos and Creation in the Backyard, and it's this brilliant sort of almost melancholy at times acoustic album, really authentic sounding record. And then that pulled me on to the new album, which came out a few years ago. He was actually touring when I saw him last. And there were some fantastic songs on this. I mean, there were some real upbeat songs like Queenie Eye, fantastic. But there are also some really slower tunes that are just retrospective type tunes, like a song called Early Days, which is all about him and John before they were famous, before they were in the Beatles, just getting together and writing together. Absolutely brilliant song, and fantastically well performed and recorded. But again, it's the song of an older person. And so the fact that his voice does sound that much more gravelly adds to the authenticity of what he's singing about and adds to the emotion of the song. So for anybody that's saying, oh, McCartney's voice is not what it once was, I absolutely disagree with you. It's different. It's aged, it's become more mature, but that doesn't mean it's less relevant. I think that McCartney is hugely relevant in 2018, and he will continue to be hugely relevant for years and years to come. Not only for the work that he's doing now, but also for the work that those that are coming to it from the new work will then go to explore his older work, and we'll find all kinds of gems. And I'm still mining gems from McCartney. I'm still mining Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. I also only recently discovered Wren, which I've got down here, which again is another absolutely fantastic McCartney album that I never realised had such a wealth of great material on it until I revisited this new remastered set fairly recently in the last few years, and I'm so glad that I found it. The first McCartney album I absolutely love. It's got Maybe I'm Amazed on it. It's just an absolutely great album, recorded by Paul on his own by all accounts, sort of just using a very simple recording setup. So I'm absolutely wrong to write him off and say Flowers in the Dirt was the end of Paul McCartney. That's not true, and I think everybody on the vinyl community would agree with that. The songs perhaps were more poppy and perhaps more radio friendly back in 1989 than they are now, but why should he be radio friendly? You know, this is an artist who has gravitas, and you know, I actually love artists in this later stage of life, because another artist that springs to mind that had a similar resurgence of producing great material was probably Johnny Cash. I mean, I've only fairly recently discovered his American recordings, and by far and away, those American recordings, those albums, and he's getting progressively older as the albums go on, I think are some of the best, most mature, most emotional music that Johnny Cash ever released. And I think McCartney is releasing material that has a lot of gravitas to it. Another argument about McCartney was that he doesn't work well with others. I've heard that thread as well, and I think that's probably true. But why would McCartney work well with others? I mean, he worked well with John Lennon, that's clear. But after leaving the Beatles, who's going to tell him what to do? I mean, seriously, who is going to tell Paul McCartney you are wrong, even when he is wrong? McCartney perhaps has to learn that he's wrong by having a commercial flop. Something like Press to Play is a really poor album. It's generally regarded as a poor album, and I think Paul McCartney probably realised his mistake with that. But I think it was James and Beatle James was talking about Paul McCartney not working well with the producer of Chaos and Creation in the Backyard. As I said, I think it's a fantastic album, and I think Paul, listening to what James had said, was absolutely pretty much told what to do in respect of that album, and then he sort of rebelled against that by going to do his own thing with Memory Almost Full, which I don't think is quite as strong. I think that the Chaos and Creation album is the better album. Let me know what you think in the comments. My only real criticism of New, and probably it's another good example of Paul not playing well with others, is that the album has, I think, 3 or 4 different producers on it, and so the songs throughout the album do sort of vary in tone, and they do have a slightly different tone. And I think that Paul McCartney probably would have been better to have had one producer on this album so that the sound across the songs was consistent. I mean, all of the songs are of high quality and they're all recorded brilliantly well, but each producer puts a slightly different mark and a slightly different feel to the songs. And I think that if the album had just had one producer, it would have felt like a more coherent piece of work. But this is still a great album. It's well worth picking up and listening to, and exploring new McCartney material and proving to yourself that he is still relevant in 2018. Is that some of the new videos on Paul McCartney have been talking about his new album that's coming out, I think, in September of 2018, called Egypt Station. And essentially Paul is using YouTube, he's using the internet to cleverly market this, and he did this secret gig where he played in Liverpool in a pub where he played some of the songs very recently, a few days ago, and he's getting people excited for the album. And I am actually really excited to hear the new album. If you'd asked me that probably 3 years ago, I'd have said, oh, McCartney, he's a great songwriter, he's had a great career, but I think he's done in terms of being a great songwriter. He seems to have mined all of his ideas. Listening to some of the stuff I've just mentioned, I totally refute that. I was wrong 100%, and I apologise for being so wrong. But I'm excited to hear the new album because I think that Paul's got a lot of mileage left in him and a lot of gas in the tank, for want of a better word. Not sure about some of the new songs that I've heard so far. I mean, we've heard the song, you can find it on YouTube easy enough, Come On To Me. Well, I come on to you, you come on to me. To me, that lyric's a little bit throwaway. It hasn't got a lot of depth to it. it perhaps is not the most appropriate lyric for our times, and it's perhaps not the most appropriate lyric for somebody of Paul's age to be singing. But I do wonder, is it supposed to be like a social commentary? Unlike something like the Me Too movement, is Paul making a statement? I don't know. I guess we'll find out when I've heard the song a bit more and he comes out and he talks about it a bit more. But it is slightly inappropriate, sort of lyrically. But it's a good upbeat tune, and for somebody his age to be rocking out like that is just absolutely phenomenal. And it shows that he really does sort of, you know, he would just break the rules and break all the boundaries, and good on him. He is a national institution. He's one of our greatest exports, and I'm proud to say that I'm a huge Paul McCartney fan. I'm even wearing the t-shirt today. So basically that's my two penneth on Paul McCartney. That's my views on his voice, on the new album, and on his work in the last few years. Please let me know what you think. If there are videos that I haven't seen, please leave me links to your videos so I can see them in the comments section. And as ever, if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. Until next time, this is the Media Preacher. Keep on preaching.